Welcome to this, the second last episode in the Creating the Habits You Want series. It's my objective to help people find real happiness in life, become healthier, and experience better relationships. In short, to enjoy the very best that life can offer. But what I've learned along the way is that the progress that we make in these and in other areas is largely due to good habits. So why is it that so many of us have difficulty implementing the habits that we might like to develop, and instead end up hanging on to unhelpful ones? In previous episodes, we started looking at the insightful work on habits done by such people as Charles Duhigg, James Clear, and others. We saw how an identity-based approach to developing new habit patterns could serve to embed them in our daily life, making them congruent with our values, automatic, and easy to sustain. Digging down into the actual structure of a habit loop, we then learned how it would be helpful to find an effective trigger for the new habits we wish to embrace, and also the need to make them attractive, easy to perform, and satisfying. But what of those behavior patterns that we'd like to change? In the last episode, we considered how well our emotional needs are being met, and saw how unhelpful habits can be triggered when they are not. In this video, continuing on the theme of bad habits, we look at effective ways of dealing with them. And in the next and last episode, we will do a bit of habit troubleshooting. Before we get going, if you haven't already done so, may I invite you to take a moment to find the subscribe button on your screen and use it to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, because I'd like these videos to reach as many people as possible, please feel free to share them with anyone you think might find them of value. As you will have already realized by now, our suggested way of dealing with bad habits is not to simply eliminate them, but rather to replace them with better habits. Last time I asked you to make a list of the ones that you're unhappy with. When doing this, I suggested that you draw 3 columns on a piece of paper. In the first, I asked you to list the bad habits themselves. In the second, to attribute a possible reason you may have adopted each of these initially, specifically the emotional needs that they might serve to meet. And in the third column, possible new, more positive habits you might like to consider using to replace the ones you no longer want. It seldom works when we're advised, usually by well-meaning friends, relatives, or colleagues, to simply stop doing the bad habit in question. This is because, firstly, for reasons already mentioned, it is often not effective for us to rely solely on our willpower in this way. And secondly, because doing so might inadvertently take us back to a time or a situation where our basic needs were not being adequately met. It therefore makes good sense to replace our bad habits with more helpful ones if we can, preferably with ones that will continue to meet the underlying needs of the earlier one. In this regard, James Clear suggested the following 7 steps. Number 1, choosing an effective substitute for our bad behavior pattern. Here, we plan for a time when we are faced with the stresses that would previously have triggered our old habit. Hopefully, our homework last time will have gone some way in preparing us for this, and will have provided us with viable alternative behaviors. Number 2, avoiding or eliminating bad habit triggers. For example, just not going to a bar if it's likely to set off a binge drinking habit that we prefer to get rid of. Or not stocking up on ice cream at a supermarket if it's likely to perpetuate an undesirable, compulsive late night snacking habit. Number 3, pairing up with someone who also wants to change his or her eating pattern, for example, or perhaps exercising with a friend so as to break a habit of being sedentary. Number 4, visualizing success. I love this one. If binge eating is the habit we wish to break, imagining ourselves being slim, toned, and wearing something absolutely amazing. Or if procrastination is getting in the way of our studies, seeing ourselves with the qualifications we desire, and with all the wonderful benefits that might flow from it. Number 5, returning to a previous you. Rather than imagining that breaking the habit would necessitate becoming a completely different person, realizing that there was already a time when you were just that person without the habit. For instance, if we smoke, there would have been a time before we started smoking. We just need to go back to being that person. Number 6, using the word but to overcome negative talk. We are more likely to succeed in replacing our bad habits with good ones if we are kind to ourselves. Negative feelings such as guilt or shame are particularly unhelpful, as they will only serve to paralyze us. For this reason, it is helpful to temper any negative talk with the word but. I'm out of shape, but I'm working on changing that. Or, I've failed in a particular task, but of course everyone fails from time to time. 7. And then actually planning for failure. Each of us is likely to mess up at one time or another. It's only human to do so. The difference between those that ultimately succeed and those that don't is that rather than beat themselves up, winners quite soon get themselves back on track. Should we hope to change our life for the better, awareness becomes a key skill for us to develop. And awareness is also key to what we are doing here. In the last video, we spent some time becoming more aware of our emotional needs and as to whether they are being properly met. It is now time for us to become more aware of the nature of our habit or the habits that we wish to replace. So, for homework this time, I'm going to suggest that we carry a pen and paper around with us for a few days in order to accurately record how frequently we engage in the habit that we are wishing to change. You may instead prefer to do this on your phone, but either way, please also keep track of what triggers the behavior and where, when, and with whom it occurs. Often, such an increased awareness will alone reveal exactly what we need to do to change what we want to change. It is often useful to create some clear, strict rules for ourselves. For example, rather than choosing to cut down on our consumption of starchy foods, we may decide on a very specific rule which will restrict our bread intake to just 2 slices a day. Or if we wanted to limit our distractions, rather than to have just a vague goal to cut down on our use of the internet, we may choose to create a rigid rule for ourselves that will have us check our emails just twice a day, such as only between 10 and 11 a.m. and then again between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. This sort of rigid approach serves to make our behaviors exact and easy to follow. And of course it allows us to be the sort of person that lives by the values we choose. And therefore the sort of person that acts or doesn't act in a very particular way. There are 2 important tips I'd like to stress here. The first is to start small. Creating good habits in a small way will produce easy wins that form a strong foundation for growth. If you ask a gym-dedicated fitness advisor how they initially got going, many will tell you that they first almost reluctantly joined the gym for some flimsy reason, and then only later, through their habit of attending, got hooked into lifting weights or whatever they may be doing there. Rather than it being some great goal, more than anything else, it was largely the habit of going that changed their life for the better. The other is to always be kind to yourself. The idea that you won't change unless you beat yourself up is a fallacy. The only important thing is to decide to change. And change becomes so much easier when we simply identify ourselves as being the sort of good person that practices good habits. Things are likely to go wrong at some point. So in the next video, we'll do a bit of troubleshooting. In the meanwhile, I invite you to leave your comments below, or if you prefer, to contact me privately through my website, christophernorris.co.uk. Thanks for watching. My name's Christopher Norris. I live and I work in London, but for those of you based further afield, I also work online. Expect life to be different. I very much look forward to seeing you back again in video 5, which will sadly be the last in the series.